And now I'll begin my lengthy and exciting slideshow, of which you're currently seeing the title screen. Just kidding. This is actually the only slide. Um, I really don't like slideshows. I'm going to spend the rest of the time giving a live demonstration, but this is what's coming up. So I'm going to give a brief overview of RealTest in case any of you haven't seen it or used it yet. A quick tour of recently added features. Um, and then I'm going to take the the long short strategy pair that I actually traded for most of the time that's documented in the Market Wizards chapter, um, or this example script that's sort of an average of them. But anyway, I'm going to see if we can make it tradable again. And after we spend some time doing that, we're going to get into the AI portion and show you how to use Claude Code with RealTest, which I've been working on a lot recently, and it's pretty amazing what it can do. We'll do some live research sessions, and I'll show you briefly how I've been using Claude to work on the RealTest code itself. Um, Talk about what's coming up in RealTest evolution, and then take questions. That's it in a nutshell. Now let's get into the actual software. So that's Zoom. You already know what that is. Um, right, right. Excuse me a second. I have to figure out how to get this bar out of the way. Oh, I see. It brings itself up. Isn't that nice of it? Okay. Um, so yeah, this is the RealTest. It's a Windows app. It Most of the time you're in a script editor. What you see here is one of the scripts that's in the examples. This is a very simple rotational strategy for the S&P 500 sector ETFs. It's just a little example I put together actually to show how to structure a rotational system with the cross-sectional rank factors. I parameterized this one with some different look back lengths, some different counts of positions to hold, and also a little Momo, because I thought it would be fun to not only test momentum-based rotation, but also the inverse. And So we have that. So for those who haven't seen a RealTest script, you can see it kind of reads like more like a form almost. RealTest is I designed it by choice to not include a programming language, so it's explicitly not a programming language. Um, but at the same time, my goal was it had to be powerful and flexible enough to be able to backtest any types of strategies anybody would want to test with it. It's pretty well accomplished that. Can't do everything, but anyway, so the scripts are organized. It's kind of like a form that you fill in as you go along. There's the outer sections of where you are in the script. This defines what you're importing, what data you're importing, what your settings for running the script are, what the parameters are if you're doing any optimizations. Those are your name parameters. Data is a very powerful section where each item is actually calculated for the entire duration of all bars of all stocks in a very fast way before the test starts. Um, and then you get into the heart of it, which are your strategy definition. This script only has one strategy definition, but you'll see later scripts with more than one. Benchmark's a special kind of strategy that's there for display purposes, but doesn't factor into the backtesting stats. It's just useful to be able to compare your equity curve to, in this case, we're just buy and hold SPY. So this strategy is saying it's long, it's going to size its positions on a percent basis to 100% divided by the number of positions. Uh, so just simple fixed fractional. The max positions constraint is the number of positions you want. And the entry setup criteria is rotate, which is defined here as end of month, and your rank. Now remember, some people get confused by rank numbers, but a low rank number means a high score. Just like the number one rank player is the one with the highest batting average, right? It's like that. So one is a low rank number, but it represents a high score. So you want, if you want 5 positions, you want the rank number to be between 1 and 5. And if it's above 5, you want to exit. So that's the simple logic of a rotational strategy. Now I should just show, when you're working with a script, the editor is very smart about what's available. Like you start typing and it gives you choices, and so on. So it's people who say they can't program, many people who say they said they couldn't program and maybe still can't, have nevertheless been able to write RealTest scripts. And now with AI, it's that much easier. So anyway, let's just have a little fun with this. So I'm going to run it in the optimizer, and this will just give you a feel for how RealTest runs. So when you run tests, every test you run gets a row in a results window where you can see all the stats. And any list window like this in RealTest has formulas behind it. Like these are the formulas for the columns that you're seeing here. And there's a lot of built-in stats arrays that you can reference. And I've got a lot of commented out things that can be added by just removing the comments. But just to show you that behind the scenes, it's very customizable. But so let's see, how did it end up? Now I'm not surprised, but you might be, that all the top results were the ones that use inverse momentum, so more like mean reversion. So let's see, the very best one. And then, so yeah, you can double click on a results row to see the graphs, and you can use the arrows to go through the results and compare them. You can look at other things like the drawdowns, the exposure. Well, that's just going to be 100%, and so on. So that is interesting. Now, I notice that while this beats SPY nicely, it kind of gained its edge way back in the early 2000s and hasn't gotten farther ahead since then. So now I'm curious, well, what if we ran it from here? So just for fun, let's change the start date to 4/1/09. And to me, that means April 1st, not January 4th, just so you know. No fooling. So let us do this. Actually, I could have just run the same one, but interestingly, as now we have more of a mix of the ones and the zeros in that last column. And so that mean reversion flavor seemed to have had the biggest impact back in the early 2000s or late 90s. So anyway, that's an interesting thing. A lot of what people might do in RealTest is explore concepts like this. I wouldn't necessarily trade this strategy, but it's just interesting to play with it. So yeah, that's that one. I'll just show one more of the example scripts just to get into multiple strategies. Fittingly, it's called combine.rts. So this has 4 strategies. I won't go through them in great detail, but it's the first one just takes one of the strongest of 3 ETFs, stocks, bonds, or gold. The second one, the little weekly pullback strategy on Dow components. The third one is a well-known NASDAQ 100 rotational, similar to the thing we were just looking at. And the fourth is trading a VIX ETF, either long or short, depending on the contango of the VIX index 1 month versus 3 month relationship. So you got the import section, imports what you need for all the strategies. And we'll just run the test to show you. So this is going back to 2010. So yeah, when there are multiple strategies, you can see the 4 strategies plus the combined result. If you prefer, you can hit the C key to show combined as a shaded area rather than a line. Drawdowns, combine, and it's sometimes you have to hide combined to see the others. Anyhow, oh, and another thing that people often use is you can select a results row. I didn't show earlier, you can see the trades on charts. You can also go to a report, which opens into your browser. RealTest will generate the HTML to show a report and then open it in the browser. You can see the local file path right there. And so this shows the rows here in this top table are the same as the columns in the results window you were just looking at, but then it breaks it down by strategy. And then it makes a monthly and yearly table. It shows your strategy correlations for both returns and drawdowns. A few of the selected graphs that you already saw. And then it gets into, this is a relatively new feature, the Monte Carlo equity analysis. It used to only have Monte Carlo by trade profit, which for these kind of longer term holding position strategies is not so useful. But randomizing the daily change in equity is more useful for this kind of look back length. So this is going to show you the backtest equity curve in the middle there, and then like the 5 best and 5 worst based on what, 1,000 times probably. Randomizing the, oh no, only 100. Okay, 100 times randomizing the daily net profit or loss and just changing the order of them. So based on that analysis, it tells you have a 16% chance of getting the worst drawdown and where the backtest result was and so on. Yeah, and then you got some trade level plots, which are not as interesting for this kind of system, but would be interesting for a more high frequency short-term trading system. Sorry, the Zoom control panel keeps popping up in front of where I want to hit the minimize button. I'll just use that. Okay. Yeah. So anyway, so that's RealTest in a nutshell. Next topic is some recently added features. So let's see, a couple things in the script editor to highlight. If you go into options, so one is show change history. I'll show you what that does in a minute. And the other is this external changes which is actually I put in for working with AI, is if some external program changes your script, RealTest can ignore it and keep the one you're working on, or it can prompt you, do you want to load the changed one, or it can automatically reload it. Or I just added this today for this demo, as you'll see, that to keep checking on a timer so you can kind of watch what an AI is doing. Then also, while I'm in here, I recently added support for dark backgrounds for all the windows. So as many people have wanted that. So, and I made it easy to change them. Provided a set of default colors for dark mode in the script editor. I'll keep it on light because I'm just more used to that. But many people prefer the dark. We can also go into program settings and select dark background for all the list windows. And then you can see them like that instead. So not a full pure dark mode, but it's closer than it used to be. Um, yeah, and then I already showed you the equity Monte Carlo that comes from the plots uh, feature, and you can see that it's now a an option there. You can do Monte Carlo trades if you want that. Um, let's see, what else do I have on my list here? Well, the other things I listed, I'll just say I can't really demonstrate them, but there's I've added the ability to detect and repair bad data, like a bar where the high is lower than the low or something like that. Which you'll never get things like that from Norgate, but some people are importing things via CSV files that they got who knows where, and or like some stuff coming from Yahoo for foreign symbols or whatever can be more suspicious. So it's useful to have it repaired, and all the repairs get logged in the import log, so you can see what they are. Um, I've added the ability to load into the data section here. You can define a variable that comes from a CSV file. So if you have any custom data derived from whatever source, and you want to pull it straight into memory arrays that can then be referenced from your other, like your strategy formulas and RealTest, you can do that. It's called DLL data file. Um, I've in starting to work with Claude Code and other agentic AIs, I've had to make improvements to the command line mode of RealTest where you run it from the command line. Um, uh, so you'll see that in action shortly. And there's a few new built-in indicators I've added recently, like the super trend indicator and some of the John Eller's filtering indicators, so smoothing things. Um, so that's kind of in a nutshell. I mean, there's a lot more things. You can always go look at the release notes if you want to know all the gory details. Um, okay, now on to the meat of this real test part. I'm just going to close everything here, and I'm going to open. Okay, so we're going to focus on the this MHP Classics. So this is in the examples folder. This version I've added a few more comments, but it's the same strategy. And this kind of approximates it's the type of systems, the only systems I was trading from 1998 through 2015, basically, um, was one long and one short, and they're both almost symmetrical, though not exactly, and basically buying breakouts, shorting breakdowns. The basic setup was it has to be a significant price breakout, change versus yesterday. Um, Unusual volume, and prior to the breakout, it should have been flat or in a pullback, so like not already moving that way. So kind of a surprise breakout or breakdown is what I was looking for. Um, and so the and it was all very short term. The holding period was typically 4 or 5 days, or let's say 1 to 5 days. Um, because the exit rule. Well, I would have a time stop. This version I have a 7-day time stop, so that's going to limit the holding period to obviously no more than 7 days. Um, and then it's basically just put the position on, have a profit target, have a stop. The very first year I traded this, I was using hard stops and hard targets. In other words, a bracket order of both put in place right after entry. Um, I soon realized the results were better if you do the stop on a closing basis. So in other words, exit the next day if it closed below your stop price. So that's what this strategy does. So it's got three exit conditions, an exit limit, and a two-part exit rule. And the data section just sets up the stuff that's needed for it. And now what's most unusual about the version that I traded that whole time is my position sizing, which is a funny looking formula, but I literally traded the same number of shares on every entry on a given day, and that number was based on what my account value was. So if I had a $500,000 account, I'd be buying 1,000 shares of every stock I traded. It's almost like how you would trade futures, but it was applied to stocks. To make that workable, I always defined a fixed price universe, so like between 10 and 80. And I did that partly because my early trading partner, who I learned this strategy from, did it that way. So I just copied him. Also, when I got around to testing the thing, it did actually test better. And I think the reason is because, though it seems illogical, you're taking, in dollar terms, you're taking a much smaller position for lower price stocks, but in risk terms, they're actually more risky. They move more on a percentage basis per day than higher price stocks, or at least they did more so back then. Now maybe that difference is less pronounced. I don't know. I haven't looked closely at it, but anyway, there's a certain amount of logic in it, even though it seems like a rather crazy position sizing method. So that is what I used. Now, in terms of universe, so this is a Norgate custom watch list that I set up. That's basically just all U.S. listed and delisted operating company non-unit trust stocks. That's what I use. I mean, I didn't have Norgate, but whatever data service I was using, all the stocks they had were my starting universe, and then I applied whatever filter I wanted to of average volume or average true range or price to narrow it down to, that would weed out the total junk. So rather than making you sit through running this, it's a longish back test because it's a huge amount of data and a huge amount of time. I did that in advance. So this is just for your curiosity, and I actually ran this with non-compounding so that the numbers wouldn't be so crazy. But these results are a little better than I did in real life. I mean, from 98 to 03 on this, if you just run that portion, it's a 70% a year with a 18% max drawdown. In practice, I was tweaking the parameters all the time, chasing what just worked recently, learning as I went along, et cetera, et cetera. So I didn't have results quite that good, but I still did okay. But anyway, just this strategy concept, this is kind of a study of it. It would have done great back then, and then this segment here is something like 30% ROR-ish. Then it flattens some more, and then since 2016, sideways to down. But then what got this back on the radar for me is it suddenly did very well in 2022 when nothing else was doing well. So that was curious. But it's been sort of flat since then. So that's the long-term picture of the strategy that's in the examples. All right. So now let's think about if I wanted to make it so I would trade it today, what would I do? All right. So let's open this. Okay, so this is um, the same strategy you just saw, just run since 2016, because I'm going to focus on that period. I'm not going to, I really don't care. If I'm going to trade something going forward, I pretty much only care how it's done over the past 10 years or so. I don't really care what it would have, whether it would have matched the results in 1999. Um, so, zooming in, and this just shows, I mean, if this period here, I mean, it made 100% return in 2 years. But if you were looking at the strategy at the end of 2021, nobody would say, "Oh, I'll trade that." So that's just kind of an interesting fact. So anyway, so here's the stats we're starting with that we need to improve on. 3% ROR, 38% max drawdown, 0.1 MAR. So, all right, let's say we have a goal of getting to at least 10% ROR and a 1.0 MAR. That would be nice. Maybe I'd think about trading it again. So, okay. So my original thought for this presentation was to actually type, changes live as you watched, but I realized there's no way I can do that. I can barely even talk, let alone type and talk. So I did it in advance in a lot of steps. So, so here's the first step. Um, I decided to change the universe. So rather than trading all exchange listed stocks, I just want to focus on the Russell 1000 and just that'll just feel much more comfortable to trade. And let's see what we can do with that. Okay, so this is so far that's the only thing I've changed. It's the exact same system, just I mean I added in Rui to the universe so that we're trading the historical constituents, and that's it. So a lot fewer trades as could be expected, and so still a pretty high drawdown, and less. So it's certainly not any more tradable by just changing the universe to the Russell 1000. Okay, so let's go to the next change, which is this one. All right, so now I put notes in each one of what I did. So now to try to make it a little more sensible to use on the Russell 1000, let's get rid of the crazy position sizing. So now we have typical 10% per position, with I'm keeping the max exposure 100. I should say I always traded with my constraint was 100% per side. If you're trading a long and a short, there's no reason not to use 100% of both. You don't even have to pay margin interest. So that's what I did. So yeah, so I went to fixed fraction. That as soon as you go to fixed fraction, it doesn't make sense to have a $80 upper limit on price. So I took that cap away. Um, the prior universe formula had ATR greater than 1. Now that we're kind of switching from dollar terms to percent terms, it makes more sense to make a percent ATR. So we're going with 2% for the mobility filter. And oh, right, the offset formulas, which how much price has to move to be considered a breakout. I had like that in the prior ones, $1.1 per share. That's no longer as significant here because we're switching from points to percents. So it's more like a stock trading system and less like a futures system, since these are after all stocks. So let's see where that gets us. All right, that gets us to a significant improvement. Now we're at 7% ROR. And the expectancy is almost doubled. So So the higher priced stocks in the Russell 1000 are obviously good to include um, in the mix. Let's see, I suppose we could open the trade list and see. All right, so yeah, we've got some. Let's go. I do this kind of thing often. I'll sort by a column and use the scroll bar thumb to guesstimate the median rather than calculating it. So, okay, my median trade entry price is around $60. Right, and so you probably saw there are some less than 10. Now, why is that? Well, probably because of gaps. Yep, that's why. It was a setup over here. And actually, we'll come to this on a later adjustment, but this version, my universe definition, I used not on the setup day, but the day before it, which is a little strange. Uh, that's why this was in the universe, because it was above 10 the day before the setup day or 2 days before the entry day. Anyway, so that's that version. Now let's see the next enhancement. We're up to number 3. Okay. Yeah, so let's make, fixed fraction sizing's okay, but as I described, the old version had a subtle element of ATR in the way I was sizing it on a percent basis anyway. So here is what you would call a risk-based position sizing, where we're risking 0.5% per trade, so to speak, by kind of assuming that, wait, I can't use a stop-based risk because I don't use hard stops, but ATR is a good proxy for that. Some people use standard deviation. So here that's the only change in this version is from fixed fraction to fixed ATRs, so to speak. So let's see where that gets us. Well, that substantially lowered the max drawdown and increased the Sharpe. So that did, in effect, make the strategy less risky. So that's good. Okay, next is going to be number 4. So what did I do next? Oh yeah, this is pretty arbitrary, but the other versions, for whatever reason, I used to use these numbers a lot. 4-day moving average of price. Actually, I remember I had some versions where I had the 4-day crossing over the 9-day as a kind of it had to have a little pullback and now it's breaking out thing. For some reason, I always like the 9-day average of volume for measuring volume surge and a 5-day average true range. I don't know why, but I decided let's just make them all 5 days. I didn't change the comments. Let's fix that now. There we go. So I didn't do this because I thought it would improve the performance, and I didn't optimize it. You'll notice in this entire process, I don't use the optimizer at all. I'm really just interested in adjusting the logic of the strategy so it makes more sense to me and seeing if I can improve it in the process. So let's see what that did. Whatever this did is arbitrary. All right, it happened to reduce the ROR a fraction and reduce the max drawdown a couple points. So, okay, I'll take it. If it had been hugely different, I would have been a little suspicious. If it had been hugely worse, I don't know what, I probably wouldn't have kept it, but whatever, we'll keep it. All right, so let's go to number 5. What did I do next? I can't even remember. Hello, you can open. Okay, so this, oh, right. So I decided I don't know why I thought of this, but I thought, let's go for a larger breakout price threshold. And also let's take out, before I had a different one. For shorts, I had 4%, and for longs, I had 2%. But in either case, it had to be at least 1 ATR. So now let's say for something to be classified as a breakout, I want it to be an 8% one-day move. And that also has to be at least 2 times the ATR, which it usually would be, but maybe if the ATR is 5%, it wouldn't be. So let's see what that looks like. So that's going to reduce the trade count quite a bit. But it also reduced the max drawdown and it increased the expectancy substantially, which isn't too surprising because you've got more movement going on. Your average exposure is only under 30% now. So let's see if we can get a few more trades in some other way. And that leads to number 6. So I had before the volume surge thresholds at 3 times. So I needed the breakout to show 3 times average volume to be considered a valid breakout. So now I'm saying, okay, let's just go for 2 times and to kind of add some more trades now that we've reduced them so much with the price threshold. So run that test. And then that gets us up to, wow, okay, so that gets us up to 13% ROR. Max drawdown goes up a little, but I'll take the extra 1.5% to get 6 extra ROR points. And the expectancy keeps growing. So that was a nice change. And it makes sense to me. When I change a system, I want to know that it has some basis. It's sensible to me. Russell, the volume surge was more important for, I think, for smaller cap stocks and also for in the Russell 1000, which are widely traded by institutions, you're not going to have such unusual volume as often. So to me, that change is also logical. Now, what did I do next? Oh, okay, right. I thought, why not just since we're having this thing we're requiring a big move, why do we want it to already have had a high ATR before it made the move? Like, why not something that's been sleepy and then suddenly there was good news and it had a huge breakout? So I took that out from the universe definition, and that had a nice result. Now we got over our 1 MAR, and the expectancy went down a little, which is actually not surprising because we're now letting some lower ATR stocks into the mix. So you're going to get some smaller wins. But the percent wins stayed the same around 56. Okay, I think there was just one more enhancement I ended up making, even though we were already at the goal, which was right. A few versions ago, I showed you how the universe definition was the day before the setup day, which I thought was weird. So I just moved it up. I'll show you what that looks like. It just basically whether it has an offset. The long setup was the universe 1, which means one day before the setup day. I mean, this one needs an offset because the pullback should have been the day before the setup. And then the setup day, which is also the breakout day, is where the volume surge and the price surge happened. So now we're moving the universe check up to the actual breakout day itself. And so that's going to oh, wait, where'd the volume thing go? Did I also take the volume? No, that doesn't make any sense. I didn't intend to take the volume. threshold off. Let's put that back on again. All right. I mean, we could try taking it off as well. But anyway, so here we have can trade universe. So that's universe as of setup day. All right. Well, let's see how this does. Very similar. Didn't make a huge difference. Now, just for curiosity, what if we don't have a volume filter? I guess there are some thinner stocks in the Russell, not too many. It's basically the same either way, any of the above. I think we might as well leave it off because it really doesn't make a huge difference in the Russell 1000. I could just run a scan to see how often that occurred, but okay. So that's the evolution of MHP Classic into something that's maybe tradable. I mean, it looks like that. I don't know if I would necessarily trade it. Now, if we wanted, we could go back and run another import and go longer term with it, but I'm going to move on to other things. So actually, for the next thing I want to do, no, let's just open a new results file temporarily. And then, so my next thought with this is to leave this where it is and add another strategy. And how about something that holds a little longer term to complement the short term nature of these? So this is just there's a NASDAQ 100 example script. This is just the same script modified for the Russell 1000. With a NASDAQ example, I think it uses 5 positions, which maybe makes sense when there's only 100 in the universe. With 1,000 in the universe, probably want more than 5. But I made that an optimization parameter so we can see. And so we're just looking at the same period since 2016. So let's just run optimize to see what the 5 position count flavors do. And I don't know, let's sort by sharp. That gives us 10. It's interesting. It doesn't actually make a huge difference. But I'll just go with 10. Okay. So let's merge that strategy in to the other one. And I've already done that. Here, I call it Neoclassic plus Momo. And it's the same. Oh yeah, I called it 4, but I only had 4 versions of this as of this afternoon, and I thought, wait, let's show every single little step, so I expanded it to 8. So it's really number 8 plus, right? So here's the same one we just finished testing, and then so all I had to do here to combine them is I had to add one include list because the rotational uses SPX index as a regime filter. So we had to import with that, and then just use the same data file and paste the other strategy into the bottom. Oh, and I added a combine. So this is also changed in the other version. I had in my common template, I had max exposure 100% per side. So what I'm going to do now that I'm going to start adding things to it is not put a max exposure at any individual strategy, but just use combined and use max long exposure 100, max short exposure 100. No overall max exposure, just it's really the same rule I had in the other one, but it's expressed differently. And I'm also putting max same sim 1 so that the basically it would mean you can't whatever the momentum, since it's only trading once a month, it's going to govern this. So the breakout strategy can't trade something that the momentum strategy is already holding. That seems to make sense. So let's see what that does for the results. You can see part of a lot of my design goals in RealTest was to make everything run fast, so you can just interactively experiment with stuff like we're doing right now. So yeah, max drawdown goes up, which isn't surprising because that thing had a pretty high max drawdown. But we're putting 20% of the account. That I should have pointed that out earlier. The quantity in the other one, this said 100 divided by momopause. Now we're using um, Momo's size, which is 20. So that's the best way to control your strategy allocations in a multi-strategy script, is to just have a numerator in your quantity formula if you're using fixed fraction, uh, or a multiply. I mean, I could have done times 0.2, same thing. So, it's starting to go to log scale, so it looks a little more normal. It's starting to look like something that might be decent. So I'll leave it there for what we're going to be doing manually. And now we'll sure save that, close all the script windows. And all right, now let's change gears and start talking about AI. So the one that I've been using that I like a lot here is Claude Code. And this is for those who haven't seen it, the Claude Code Windows app. And they also, when I first started using it, which was really only about a month ago, maybe 2, 1.5, somewhere in there, I was using the command line that looks like this. You run git bash, and then you go, well, I don't want it on the desktop. You might go to like, you have to use Unix path syntax in this thing because it's a bash shell. I would go like so, and then it would start up. Eventually, right. And then you just type and tell it what you want it to do. And it's works amazingly well, actually. Now I'm just going to go. And they more recently introduced the app. It's the exact same thing running underneath in the background, but it turns out this is an easier way to interact with it that I'm finding I prefer. So and here you can go to any previous sessions, and you select which folder you want to work in. So I'm going to explain what's going on here shortly, and then you can choose the model. I pretty much always use Opus, which is their best model. I sometimes put it on high effort for working with my source code for RealTest, but medium works fine for most purposes. So in terms of how RealTest works with Claude Code, I've done a lot of work with that, and you'll see this in the next release. I've actually even added a doc page now, which says exactly how to set it up. But it's basically very simple. You just can download the Windows app from claude.ai/download and install it like any other Windows app, and that's it. That's all you need. I mean, you need to have an account. I initially, when I was started working with it for the first several weeks, I was on their pro level, which was $20 a month. And I could probably live with that most of the time. I did when I was doing some intense work on RealTest and Order Clerk with Claude. I kept hitting the usage limits and getting frustrated. So I just, and unlike ChatGPT, you have to go all the way to 200 a month for the max or whatever they call it. But Anthropic nicely added a medium tier 100 a month, which is what I'm on now. And I find so far it's quite sufficient and very much worth it for me because it's accelerating my ability to improve RealTest. so much. So now I've set up, now the key point is how do you prompt it? So I'm going to show you what I've got. As of the next release, all the RealTest versions the installer will create this additional folder under the scripts folder called research. And this is what it'll have in it. So there's a there's a Claude.md is the like the prompt. It whenever you point Claude at a folder, it looks for that file, and that's the basic prompt. And it's just a text file, so we can open it in RealTest in a log window. I mean, it's Markdown. I don't have a Markdown viewer in RealTest, but it's readable. So sorry, I have a stiff neck. My eyes see at different heights, so I have to keep my head tilted to the side in order to read the screen. Um, the so this is these two Markdown files that will come with RealTest were not written by me. They were written by Claude. So I iterated with it, as I gradually worked with it on learning to write RealTest scripts. I kept telling it, update your Claude.md, and then at one point I pointed it to my source code folder and said, read the entire RealTest source code and write a RealTest script language reference that'll be useful for you for making RealTest scripts. I put this on the RealTest forum called RealTest system prompt.md, but I've since renamed it to RealTest script language.md. And we've been through a lot of iterations of it. And it'll continue to be part of the releases. But it's really a wonderful, concise definition of the entire script language, including a couple of example scripts at the end. And what I find, observing what Claude does is when I prompt it to do something with scripts, it makes its best guess from what's in Claude.md, which is a much shorter version. These things are really helped by keeping their prompts as short as possible, but not too short. So it's sort of like that. And then it'll consult the longer RealTest script language.md reference when it it finds an error or something isn't working the way it thinks. But you'll see it in action soon. I've actually, for the purpose of this demo, I deleted the memory files that it had put for this folder so that it'll be just like you were starting out. Yeah, and then the only other thing, in this file, it explains that it can add an include of this other file to every script it's working on, which really is just very simple. The optimized no dialog for when it wants to run an optimization. This is the key one, save test list as, which just saves what you can see in a results window as a CSV file. So it's just the basic stats. So it uses that, and then it also saves the trades as. So far it hasn't thought it would be useful to use save stats as. That it doesn't have to drill into the details as much. It did, I said, well, what if you want to know if the equity curve is smooth? It said, well, you already got R squared in the results, so why would I need to look at the actual values? So, but you could instruct it to if you wanted to. This whole thing is a work in progress, and it'll probably be radically different in a month, but this is where we are. But so then this includes its own results definition so that it always knows it'll have a consistent set of columns and leave out some of the ones that are not relevant for for basic research. The prompt you'll see instructs it to focus on MAR. If you prefer to use a different stat, you can you can make your own prompt that's different. But this gives you the framework to get started with it. So let's give it a whirl. So you just point to that folder that I was just showing you. And now I've actually, so I ran this prompt yesterday, and now I'm very curious to see if it'll do the same thing. I'm going to copy and paste the exact prompt that I ran yesterday so you can see what it is. Well, I didn't have an A. That's just from my little file. So yeah, I said, find the best mean reversion strategy for the QQQ ETF going back 10 years. Narrate, I cannot spell. There we go. Your thinking and what you're trying along with the results you're seeing. Because when I first was experimenting with this yesterday, for what I would show you today, um, it would just do all the steps internally and not show me what it was doing. So it wouldn't have made a very good demo. So I said, what should I say to make it a better demo? And it told me to use the word narrate. So I'm using the word narrate. Um, okay, so I'm going to run this now and see what happens. All right, so let's move this over here. Now I'm going to see what it's doing. All right, so I've told it about the examples folder, so it does tend to search the examples folder to look for things. A lot of how these things work is they look for a pattern that they can reuse. Now let's see, did it open anything yet? Extern. I don't know why it thinks it needs extern. All right, so it's showing its thinking here. All right, it should have created a QQQMR. Oh, there it is. Okay, cool. Now, I've got this, I think I've got this, yeah, I'm in timer option. So we should be able to see now every time it changes the script if that feature I just added works. All right, so it's written a script, it's run it, it's looked at the results, it's trying something else. Oh, there you go. Now it just changed. So it uses command line RealTest. So this version of the instance of RealTest you're looking at had nothing to do with what it's doing. Every time it wants to run a script, it launches RealTest and runs the script. In fact, you can see the command lines here that it's executing. So you can see it's trying stuff. And see if we make this a little smaller, you can see more than once. These lines at the bottom were if-def research. I just added a feature that'll be in the next build where you can put pound define, slash dash define on the command line for batch mode. Yeah, you can see there it says define research. So that lets you use conditional comments for stuff that you only want there when you are in AI mode. So that's why, like, I don't want it to always save the test list and save the trade list when I'm just playing around myself. But when it's driving, it needs those. So that's what that little block is doing. It's one of the various things that I added. I also added a dash parse so it can just run syntax checks. And so let's see, we're up to 7. I told it to do 10, I think. All right, see, it just ran an optimization and then looked at the output from the optimization. I mean, It types a lot faster than I can. You know, this is just what it's deciding to do. I mean, you can tell it exactly what to test or give it very specific ideas or just give it a vague idea and tell it to go iterate. Um, and so all it needed is for context is those two MD files I showed you. It doesn't need the user guide or the forum contents or whatever. You know, it knows enough about markets and trading from whatever all its trading data is that huge finding. Okay. It can be very addictive to just kind of sit here and watch this thing run. I try to discipline myself to stay with things I actually need to be doing. But it's doing so well because we've had many iterations where I've seen it stumbling and then I've told it to update those MD files. So they're now at a point where they're quite useful. Right. I had one run a couple days ago where I told it to do a TQQQ mean reversion strategy, and at one point it added VIX, dollar VIX, to use as a regime filter or something, and it didn't know that it had to say and symbol equals TQQQ in the entry setup, so it thought it had a 200+% ROR strategy because it was trading the VIX. So that was kind of funny. So I told it to look at the trade list at the end to make sure. All right. So it came up with something probably over optimized, but that's okay. Okay, now let's do this. Here's my next little prompt. Copy and paste that one. So now that it's built something, let's have it merge it into the other script. Now, this is something that I know that over the years, some of you have really struggled with, well, I've got these separate strategies and separate scripts. How do I merge them? We're going to have all these name clashes and I have to figure out a unified import and blah, blah, blah. That's the kind of thing Claude can do easily, um, sort of grunt work like that. So here I'm just telling it to go to the folder that we were just in and take that version of Neoclassic plus Momo that we had and merge in the best QQQMR and try some different allocation percents and tell me what the results are. So let's see how it does that. Oh yeah, now one other thing that I've done here, if you look in here, the RealTest installer will configure this, but it basically gives it permission in advance to do anything it wants in this specific folder, research folder. Otherwise, it's asking you permission all the time before it can run RealTest, and it gets very annoying. So I set that up. Now let's see, it should by now have copied that thing over. Yeah, there it is. And yep, see it. Oh, look at that. It even used the same comment format. I've been very impressed by how it's in my RealTest code. It uses my exact coding style when it makes any changes. And yep, it knew to put QQQ on the include list. This thing is amazingly good, I have to say. The Claude Code. And I'm sure you've heard that elsewhere. I mean, everybody's talking about it. Now that's weird. Why did the optimizer window pop up over here? I've seen that happen once before when I'm monitoring from another instance, it pops up in the wrong instance. I think this exit code 8 was probably that. I should have pressed OK. All right, I think I screwed it up. Hold on. I'm gonna interrupt. You can interrupt it and huh. All right, I have to figure this out. Why the dialogue is popping up? Oh, no, I know. Actually, it's because it forgot to put optimize settings, op no dialogue in the script. That's why. Oh, right. It forgot to put. Uh, See, you can, if you're watching, you can kind of steer it a little bit as it goes along and get it back on track when it makes an error. It certainly isn't perfect. Of course, we can't see like the results window or anything else from what it's doing because it's in a separate instance. All we can do is look at the edits to the script as they go by. Hmm. There's a new, those of you who have been using batch mode in RealTest know that it creates an error log.txt that accumulates over time. And there's a new separate file called batch log.txt, which Claude wanted, which is just only has the last run in it. And it also, it doesn't just stay silent if it succeeded. It says okay. So that helps it know what it's doing. All right, cool. Now let's do one more thing to this script. See if this one goes faster. It doesn't involve an optimization, so it should. Um, so there's another example of this kind of thing you can do. I'm saying merge in the VIX long short strategy from combine.rts example script and see what that adds to the results. Okay. Yeah, and then of course, after it's written these scripts, you can go in and manually play with it, run them yourself and look at the results, look at the trade list, do whatever you want. But does a pretty nice job of summarizing as it goes along. It's funny, when I did that exact same prompt about QQQ yesterday, it got a little bit stuck at that it was getting no results, and it said it assumed that QQQ was in the Russell 1000, and so it didn't add it to the import. Today it seems to have known to add it. Who knows? Anthropic might have updated the model 6 times since yesterday, for all I know. Um, you're never going to get the same result twice from the same prompt. It's all probabilities. So it had to re-import it because it had to add the VIX symbols. And now it's looking at the results, and now it's building what it wants to tell us about them. And there it is. So that gives you an idea of what you can do with that. It's getting on in time, but the fourth thing I was going to do, but I probably won't bother, is to show because I see there are a lot of questions piling up. Um, you know, the technical analysis of Stocks and Commodities magazine. And by the way, thank you to everyone listening who voted for RealTest. I was very happy to um, win the category. But I provide RealTest code every month for that traders tips section of that magazine, and the last few months I've actually gotten Claude to do it. I literally just say read this PDF because they send me a PDF of the article in advance. Uh, Implement the strategy in RealTest, run it and compare the results. And actually I'll show you the last the May edition, which I think is out. Maybe it isn't, but anyway, there's yet another John Eller's article in there, and we went through a few versions. Let's see, May. Yeah, I thought it couldn't be done because it had an outer loop, but it cleverly did it by putting in 20 correlation items, and then the first version, okay, I had all these Eller's filters functions calculated the old hard way in data in lots of different data. And that's when I decided to add them to RealTest. And I actually got Claude to do it and did it very quickly and easily. Um, so anyway, I'm using it to write those, or at least as a first pass. Of course, I review them before sending them in and maybe change the wording a little. Um, so so yeah, that's I was going to show it translating one of the older ones, but it's not really going to be that interesting. It's just going to sit there for a while and then you'll see the result. So I won't bother with that. I was going to show briefly how I use it to work on the RealTest code, but I think I'll skip that as well. Oh, I can show you one just from an old session for your interest, because I'm also using it now for um, doc updates, which is very convenient. I mean, I'm working towards the next release, 31.7. And yesterday I prompted it, read my release notes.txt these lines. Because the documentation I use Helpsmith, and if you understand their XML format, you can edit the XML files directly. And that's the kind of thing I would never try to do myself, but Claude's pretty good at that. So now I can just prompt it like that, and it updates the documentation, and it does a surprisingly good job. I had it go through and add examples to about 100 indicators and functions that were missing examples. and it did a good job of that. So it's been useful for working on code, working on documentation. Uh, there's just any number of things that it's going to make possible. It's almost overwhelming. Um, so that leads to my next topic, which is what's next for RealTest, and I'm the big one that I've been putting off for years is intraday data, and I think with the help of Claude Code, I'm going to probably be able to implement that fairly, not easily, but it's now possible. So that's the next thing I want to work on. Actually, uh, I have to. I'll probably have to fork the code for that so that I can continue to put out normal maintenance releases while working on that. But we'll see. Maybe it'll go fast. And it may become a separate version of RealTest. I don't know if it's going to be possible to keep everything working like it does and support intraday data, or to have two different versions. We'll find out when we go along. But anyway, that is the next thing I'm planning to work on. I've got a few other things that have been on my list for a while, user interface things or whatever. But uh, there's any number of possibilities. Also, it just makes it that much easier for me to do smaller things that people request, do things more accurately. Uh, it's been a big win. Okay, I'm gonna stop talking and look at some questions. Let's see, which, okay, I see the older ones are at the top. Sorry, I'm looking at the questions window and trying to understand it here. Okay, so question from David, are you doing an entry right at the moment the breakout occurs? Okay, so you're talking about the MHP classic strategy. That example is actually buying at the next open the day after the breakout. So that's what it's doing in that version. Um, you actually can't buy at the I mean, so to do RealTest sort of emphasizes using daily bars and generating orders when the market is not open for the next day. So basically your options in that model are to buy at the open or to buy tomorrow with a limit order. Um, so, but if you had um, an order management system that included live data, you could do it at the close. And I actually used to trade that way in the mid 2000s. I was having a live data feed and buying these buying or shorting these things at the just before the close, and then even earlier in the day, even starting 5 minutes after the open. But and actually, if I do intraday data, maybe I can test some of those things again. I haven't been using a live data feed since 2015. I've just been using end of day, but I want to get back to that at some point. Have I found the memory footprint increase? I don't know what that means. I haven't had to change anything about my computer or RealTest as a result of using Claude. I try to keep it very, very like stay very focused when I'm working with Claude. Like I frequently start a new session. You want to keep the context as small as possible, and it makes it most effective. If you ever get to the point where it's saying compacting context, then I just stop and start a new session. It's like by then it's confused. Um, I think Jerry B. I think it's going to be in the. They told me it's going to be on YouTube. Um, Marcel, when Claude runs a real test optimization, is that at normal speed on your? Oh yeah, no. Claude Code does everything on your local computer. Um, you're basically giving it permission to run things on your own computer. So it's always it's running real test on my computer, and it will it 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 will occasionally, I mean, it probably, I don't know exactly how it interacts with Anthropic servers and where the big large language model runs, but presumably, bits and pieces of information are getting streamed up there for it to do analysis on, and then the answer is getting streamed back. But how that all works, I have no idea. Um, but the bulk of it, it spawns, it's using a basically multiple instances, many instances of um, like bash shells running in the background and spawning things uh, on the local computer. So it calls them tools. So it's got like an edit tool. A lot of it is the standard Unix tools like grep and sed, uh, and there's an edit tool and so on. So it's basically manipulating files on your own computer. Um, let's see. All right, Adrian. Hi, Adrian is saying, what are your thoughts on managing overfitting when using this type of process? Well, yeah, I mean, you'll hear any number of people say, the more things you try, the more likely you've overfit, and obviously this accelerates your ability to do that. Um, but it's really the same way you would manage it if you were doing a lot of backtesting yourself. Um, it's doing what you tell it to do. So you could tell it to separate the data into in sample, out of sample if you wanted. You could tell it to only run 10 iterations like I did for the QQQ thing. Uh, is it's it's really just another tool. It's almost like a programming language that's English. So ultimately it only does what you tell it to do. So it's like an employee and you're the manager. Um, when you say the documentation, you mean the RealTest documentation? 'Cause yeah, the documentation that the local documentation in the research folder that Claude uses is already marked down. That's the RealTest script language.md file and the Claude.md file. The RealTest documentation itself, I maintain in a software called HelpSmith, and which it keeps the local copy in XML, but then it can generate, like I already have it generating CHM, HTML, and PDF, which are what I mean. HTML doesn't ship with RealTest; it just gets uploaded to the website. But PDF and CHM ship with RealTest. It also can generate the docs in Markdown, which I now am having it do, and I could include them in the releases if people think that's useful. I do refer Claude to those when I need it to look at something in the documentation, which is not that often. Um, can I explain in English what Claude figured out the optimal strategy was? I'm going to assume you mean for QQQ. Let me go back to the prior session. Well, let me just look at the script. That's going to be easier, actually. Okay, so the strategy it came up with, I haven't even looked at this. So entry setup, symbol is QQQ, and oversold, right? That sounds like mean reversion. Oversold. RSI2 less than. Oh, it's just using RSI2. So RSI2 less than 30 is the entry condition, and the exit rule. All right, it doesn't want to exit the same day it entered. Because we're interesting. Yeah, it didn't even try a limit order. It just used a buy at the next open mean reversion. Um, so don't, so bars held greater than zero actually isn't doing anything. Bars held is always greater than zero by definition if you're entering at the open um, and exiting at the open. So, um, reverted, or so basically reverted is RSI2 greater than 70, time stop 3. All right. It's just a very simple traditional RSI strategy, I guess. So that's what that's doing. Um, More detail. Well, Scott is asking how I could prompt Claude to combine 30 strategies. Honestly, I have not tried that. I don't even have 30 strategies. Well, I could tell it to combine all the example scripts, I guess. Um, but um, I mean, if if you wanted to do 30, I would probably put them all in a folder and tell it to combine all the strategies in that folder and give it the path. Um, and I mean, the more, if there are specific things you want it to do, you should tell it. I mean, I wouldn't just say combine these strategies because then it has to figure out. I mean, as you know, if you tried to do, just imagine what you would do if you were doing it manually. What factors would you consider and tell it to consider those factors? Um, that we don't want to assume these AIs can figure out everything. Um, it's just a tool. So think about what would be horrible grunt work for you, um, and where you know what you want to do, but you just don't want to do it because it would be bad grunt work. So that's what it's really good at. So just tell it exactly what to do, and it does it very quickly. Do I have any privacy concerns? Oh, sorry, I skipped one. Do you ever use Claude Code in the IDE, VS Code or similar? So no, I see. I do all my work on RealTest and Order Clerk in Microsoft Visual Studio, not VS Code. Um, I think so far there's not a direct extension for Visual Studio for Claude Code that I know of, or maybe there is. But honestly, I don't feel a need to use it because it just it edits the source files directly, and then I can just look at the changes in Visual Studio. Just like RealTest was loading in the changes, Visual Studio loads them in right away, and I can see them. I also, use Git source code control within Visual Studio, and I always make sure everything's checked in before I get it to change anything, and then I can just use the Git diff to see exactly what it did. So that's been working very well for me so far. I haven't felt a need to have it be in the IDE. Privacy concerns, I assume you mean like about the fact, like if I have it work on RealTest, maybe Anthropic sees my source code or something. That doesn't even worry me slightly. I can't imagine with all that they're doing, they would be interested in trying to compete with RealTest. Um, so, uh, and the other that you can see in here, I don't even have cowork turned on. I have no interest in using that. I mean, I don't even do that stuff anyway. Like I don't use Gmail or Google Calendar or whatever. I don't create worksheets and presentations except for this one, but I only made 2 slides. Um, so yeah, and I'm not very interested in what's that thing, OpenClaw, uh, so far. That could change, but um, so yeah, everything I do is kind of local to my own little world, so I don't really have privacy concerns about it so far. Also, Anthropic, I trust them above any other company to care about the safety of what they're doing. Um, Let me see the equity curve based on the final combined strategy from Claude. Yeah, that should be quite possible. Um, that is probably in here. Should be this one. Oh yeah, it added VIX. Okay, let's see. Run the test. Hmm. Thought it ran the import. You see, I only have 6 threads. I'm still using this old little HP Micro from about 7 or 8 years ago. All right, test. All right, let's see. That's what that looks like. Um, Nope, I don't, I never offer any discounts or specials for anyone in general. I just keep the price. Everybody tells me it's way too low, which is probably true, but it just gets too confusing to figure out what to discount, who to discount when or whatever. Um, so it is what it is.
Well, we seem to have come to the end of the questions there. Sorry if we didn't get to your question. We just did moderate them a little bit just to, in the interest of time. Marston, that was an excellent, excellent presentation. So insightful, and I loved the part at the start, giving the overview of RealTest. I think that would be very helpful for those that are not familiar with the product. And the application of Claude Code is really just astounding what it's capable of. So I think that's got lots and lots of potential, and it's probably got lots of people's minds worrying right now about the potential for this type of combination.
Yeah, no doubt. And a month from now, it's who knows? It's probably going to be completely different. We'll see.
Absolutely, yes. So, just a big thank you from everybody here at the ATAA for taking the time out of your evening to share with us what you have. And I'm sure will be lots of discussion in the coming days and weeks about what people have seen here today. So, thanks once again, and thanks
Excellent.
everyone
Well,
for
thank
your
you.
time. And
Thank you
thank to
again as
everyone
well.
for joining in from wherever you are this morning or this evening. And we'll look forward to seeing you on the next one of these. So thanks again for your time, Marcin, and all the best. Good evening.
Okay, thank you.
Bye.